We're anticipating more federal funds that will come, and hopefully we will see some of those grants refreshed for Q4, Q1, Q2. And what we're seeing, obviously, is what you're seeing on the ground. The most hardest hit businesses are those consumer-facing, gathering-type businesses, restaurants, inns, retail, although retail is starting to recover a little bit. Anything that there's a gathering, wedding business, any kind of business events, those types of things really super hit hard. Those were the first ones closed and restricted, the last ones to open. So our advocacy is really focused on that. I'm just seeing in the chat that some of you are, interested, Kevin, with the real estate piece. There's a lot of change going on in that market right now. Insurance, banking, all of your customers are those small businesses. So you're starting to see those impacts as well. So as you may know, the feds have given out 2 rounds of PPP. The first round went out. The second round is just hitting the streets now. A lot of businesses are applying for those, and that's quite welcome. But there will be gaps after that PPP is expended. And so that's why we're advocating in the state legislature for more business grants targeted at those businesses who need it most. So I'm going to stop on the PPP, the grant funding, but just sort of put that over in the parking lot where you're welcome to come back to that and ask more questions about that. More recently, the governor tipped off his budget in the state and put $210 million into economic recovery. This is a wide-ranging group of programs. There is $0 in that $210 million for business grant relief, which was a little bit of a dismay to us. But there's a big but there, and that's because the feds haven't done their next piece of bringing money into the state. Once that money comes, we anticipate seeing that work its way into next year's budget. So I'd be glad to talk about the different pieces in the governor's $210 million program. I can't say that I have all of it committed to memory, but it is quite far ranging, and there are some good priorities in there for downtown redevelopment and tax credits. Tourism marketing funding for when this is over, how we go big and tell people that we want them back here. That's super important. We also have put together a restaurant recovery package. So if any of you are interested in how the restaurants are going to fare, we have created a new partnership with the Vermont Independent Restaurants and are helping them with their lobbying and communications. Most specifically, there's been a lot of change in that industry, and how are they going to survive and what are they seeing? So we've got several different pieces of information, actual pieces of legislation that we're promoting to help the restaurant industry. So if you're interested in restaurants, I can delve a little bit deeper into that. I see a thumbs up, so I'll just go down that path a little bit. So with restaurants, what they're seeing, obviously, is they're massively converting to takeout, curbside, limited indoor seating, and that has been a terrible crunch. What they're hearing from the public is, hey, great job. Oh, so glad to see you're doing well. And that is coming from a public who is standing in line getting their curbside pickup. I am here to tell you that in no way is that activity even coming close or touching what they need to survive. So while it feels good to the customer, I'm so glad you're open, I can pick up my dinner, they're not getting nearly enough dinners to make it. On top of that, the takeout model is the most expensive business model for a restaurant. So their costs have gone up. And then they also have some workforce issues with keeping people employed who want to serve customers who come to eat without masks on. So there's all of these pieces that are really hurting them. One of the things that we're promoting is some regulation on third-party apps. This is Grubhub, DoorDash, those kinds of things, really starting in Burlington, Chittenden County area, but we're starting to see it spread out throughout the state. These apps just start delivering your dinner for you. And there's questions around quality of dinner to the end user. The restaurant does not know that these third-party apps are doing the delivery. So we've suggested some regulation about compliance with notification there, so that the restaurant needs to know what is going on, who is delivering that, the time frame, the quality, who's collecting the taxes. We're also promoting liquor to go for longer. Liquor to go has been an interesting thing. I don't know about you, but I've had the opportunity to pick up margaritas curbside. What a concept. I don't think I've done that since I was in New Orleans. But the way that currently reads is when the governor stops the executive order and says, okay, we're done staying home, liquor to go goes away. And so what we're asking is for a wind down period after that, so that people aren't surprised and they don't have to pivot quickly. So maybe that order goes away sometime this summer or fall. Then maybe it goes on for 6 months longer, so that businesses can decide whether or not they want to keep that as part of their model or get rid of that. So that is being looked at as well. Another issue is wholesale pricing. Did you know that your restaurant needs to go to the same liquor store you do and buy the same bottle of, pick your favorite alcohol, at the same price you do? So there's no wholesale pricing for a restaurant. And so that's why alcohol in a restaurant is so much more expensive than you obviously picking up a bottle and mixing it yourself. They also do a much better job than I do mixing it myself. I'll just have to say they always have something creative in that world. So we're looking at maybe, if it's not wholesale pricing, some sort of special pricing, which would then bring down the costs as restaurants recover. So those are some of the things that we're working on for restaurants. These ideas came directly from the restaurants. So that's something that we're helping work on. As far as lodging goes, our small inns and B&Bs are getting hammered. Meanwhile, our Airbnbs are doing quite well. And that's because one is regulated and one is not. If you're running a licensed facility that hosts guests overnight, you have health department licenses, you have Secretary of State licenses, you have tax obligations, you have lots of things. And when something like COVID happens, you get contacted by all of them and say, here are the rules and regulations, and if you don't do them, you lose your license. No such thing happens if you're renting out your house on Airbnb. So what we've been asking for is a level playing field, a registry of sorts, just so towns in the state know who is renting out rooms, to make sure that they're adhering to the regulations, and so that they can be contacted with all the updated regulations that they and everybody else have to follow. I will tell you that has a steep climb in the legislature. We've taken a run at this before. And it gets bogged down by legislators who rent their own homes out. So we have fixed the tax issue. That tax issue, we are, as a state, collecting taxes. So that's good. So we're working on that. And I guess the other things, I'll just sort of tick off a couple of issues, and then I'd love to just open it up to some questions. So this is like your cue to think of a question. Otherwise, it's going to be deadly silent on the recording. So a couple of the other issues is a lot of the white collar professional services types jobs have been really disrupted. And we don't hear much about that because their businesses aren't suffering financially so much. But they've been a huge amount of disruption because all these people have been sent home. We're all working from home, and that's what we have to do. And so how that has gone, if you're interested in that, what employers are thinking about for the future, about having their workforce return, we're particularly concerned, and there's pros and cons to it, that if they don't come back, communities that have built sort of their downtown around the daily workforce are going to change as well. And so that might be a subject that you might be interested in as well. And then the seasonality of employment in sort of tourism towns, ski towns, it's quite significant what is happening there. A lot of influx in real estate, a lot of interest. I'm sure our host could tell you even more than I could about that, but there's been a lot of consternation and excitement in the residential real estate, and there's been an incredible amount of worry and future forecasting in the commercial real estate. So willing to talk about those things as well. I've just said a whole lot. So I would love to know if any of these issues interest you, or things that you're seeing in your business that I should be aware of, or if you want to talk about legislation or legislators or policy of any kind, I'd be glad to talk about those things as well.
Thank you very much for that. Open up to questions. Just raise your hand if you want to ask a question to Betsy. Go ahead, Scott.
Hi,
This is Scott Murphy. He's our town manager.
Great. Hi, Scott.
Two things I want to talk about. One, why is your budget so small compared to other states' budget? That's the first thing. If you want to answer that first before I give you the second comment.
So I think you're probably not talking about my budget. I think you're talking maybe about the state's tourism budget. Maybe, is that what you're referring to? Yeah, so let's talk about that. So first of all, I'm a Chamber of Commerce. I'm a 501c6 nonprofit. I am not a state entity, not a government entity at all. I have a private sector board of directors. We represent private sector businesses. And I'm an unapologetic advocate for private sector business growth. Hard to be in this state, but I am. The state's tourism department does have an incredibly small budget. You're absolutely right. It is a total of $3 million. The thought is about $2 million of that goes toward external promotion, and $1 million pays for the benefits, salaries, and overhead of the 8 employees. Just to put that in perspective, I have 4 employees in my own tourism division, and I don't have anywhere near $1 million budget for 4 people, but they have $1 million budget for 8 people. But we take our people and their people, and we work in tandem on common projects. So there is some public-private partnership on tourism promotion that we do. Why is it so small? The answer is very simple, and I will lay this absolutely at the feet of the legislature. The legislature as a whole rarely believes in marketing, and until the pandemic has not put a lot of credence in the importance of the tourism industry, regardless of how many data points that we share with them about the amount of jobs. About 11% of the economy is attributed to tourism. We have about 32,000 jobs in the state in tourism. But they have a picture of it that is that these are all low-paying, terrible jobs, and that's not true. And we try to prove that over and over again. But generally speaking, they don't have faith in this. It predominantly is in the Appropriations Committee, in both the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Appropriations Committee. Senator Alice Nitka in your district is on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and she's about the only one who gets it. Because she lives right in Ludlow, and so she sees it firsthand. But her voice is not accompanied by many others. So I give Alice a lot of kudos for standing up to that, talking about the importance of, and it's not just the ski areas, right? That is important, but it is all the surrounding businesses around a ski area or some type of major attraction like that. So we have asked for increases over the years. We got an increase last year. My guess is we'll get an increase this year because we're going to need something pretty big to tell people. We've been telling people for a year, don't come to Vermont. And that is a stark message for a hospitality industry. And we're going to have to change that messaging in a big way with welcoming messages. So there's a move underfoot to increase that.
Okay, and my second, well, sorry, I guess it is a question. You mentioned that the Airbnbs have started to pay, the state's been collecting the taxes on those overnight stays now. When did that start, and how come I haven't really heard anything about it? I know New York has just built it into their budget, and it still hasn't gone through over there yet.
Yeah, so I would say about two or 3 years ago. And I think the reason you don't see it is Airbnb and VRBO, which is the other short-term rental platform, have agreements with our Department of Taxes to blindly collect the taxes on behalf of their customer. And so there's a payment from Airbnb to the state of Vermont, but you don't know who all those people are that are paying. So that's one reason you might not know. But if you look closely at Airbnb, about 2 years ago, one of the other things was that they had to have their tax ID number on their advertisement in order to be compliant with Vermont state law. And so if you look closely, there are the tax ID numbers on that, which helps with the collection and the back reporting to the tax department. So it's not anything like if you were to book a room, for instance, you don't necessarily see that 9% rooms and meals tax. It's buried into that price, but Airbnb is remitting that to the state. We would like to see some more reporting around that. We would actually like to see that so it's not blinded. We don't get to see it by taxpayer now, like for hotels, but the tax department does. But the tax department doesn't get to see it with Airbnb because they're collecting it in total.
So where does that money go? To the general fund?
Yes. She says yes. Yes, until last year. So last year, all the rooms and meals taxes, which this is, would go to the general fund. Last year, they split the fund 3 ways. So a percentage goes to the general fund, a percentage goes to the education fund, and a percentage goes to, I believe, the environmental climate fund. I'd have to look that up, but that's a very small percentage. 0 of it goes directly to tourism marketing, which is what we had advocated for, is like, while you're divvying it up, could you put a little percent over here to help grow that? And they said unequivocally, no.
Okay, I have one. So I've spent the majority of my adult life in the hospitality business, and I worked at a local inn for about 26 years as their chef, retired about 8 years ago. So I know that piece of it. My whole family was involved in that. And now you threw out a number, 210 million for the recovery fund and how that's all going to be divvied up. I've also heard some very stark percentages of what number of these restaurants and businesses we can expect not to reopen. Primarily, I think the focus is on the restaurants because many of them been dark thus far. Have you heard any numbers through your, the Vermont percentages rather than a global or a regional number of what we can expect not to open back up?
Sure, I've heard the number 1/3, but I have no faith in that number. I have no way of knowing if that is a real number. Running a restaurant, they have very, very narrow profit margin.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for, small restaurants, there are some restaurants that are the chic place to go that are busy, 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 busy. And maybe, they've been doing it for years and years and years, and maybe they do have a reserve. Having substantial reserves in a restaurant business is tough. Having substantial reserves to get you through 10 months of almost no business, it doesn't matter who you are. That's just, nobody planned that. That's impossible. So it's not bad business modeling. It's COVID. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, but here's what I think you're going to see. We saw people, pivoting and sticking it out over the summer, building up their outdoor air dining. Then as it moved into the fall and the winter, putting up partitions outside. We've seen people putting up yurts, which to me is indoor dining, but we've seen people putting up, the outdoor heaters. But, now it's in the depths of winter and there's really no outdoor dining. And so some restaurants have decided to do what they call hibernate. they're going to close for the winter and reopen in the spring. Limiting their payroll, limiting, talking to their insurance agent and saying, can I have, less insurance for the next 4 months because, whatever, turning off what they could basically. I think when spring comes, there's going to be a reckoning of whether or not those people who said they were going to open in the spring actually do or not.
Right.
Because now you've been closed for 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
The thought of like, it's like a whole startup all over again. I think we're going to see some challenges. And then in other businesses that have more collateral, other businesses that have capital that they can rely upon, like a lodging facility, a B&B, something like that. I think they're going to be behind on so many payments too. And it's just the stories that we're gathering are heart-wrenching. Because many of our small business owners in Vermont, we have very few CEOs, right? All of our CEOs are heads of very small companies. And, your business finances are not really separated from your personal finances. And Kevin, you probably know that you and your family have been operating a small business, and people are really, really hurting.
Anyone else for a question?
Tell me how Ludlow is doing. Oh, go ahead, Barbara.
Barb, go ahead, Barb.
Really just wanted to make a comment about the local restaurants. And you had said that they've gone to curbside pickup, things like that. And I have to be honest, there's one restaurant in the area that I frequent on a weekly basis. And I almost feel bad when I do, because I know that their prices haven't gone up. But when you come out of this restaurant with all of these containers, these plastic containers that they did not have to have before, you almost want to say, gee, can I return these to you after I clean them? What can I do to help you? You almost feel guilty, if you will, about even going to the restaurant. And it's heartbreaking for all of us, really.
And, I would say I talk to a lot of these restaurants. We have a weekly meeting with restaurants, and I would say, tell that to somebody, write a note, but keep going to that restaurant because they're open trying to make it to the promised land. And the problem is every time you walk over that bridge, you find out it's not a bridge, it's just a pier, and there's still an abyss there. So they need you to keep frequenting that restaurant. And plastic containers and expenses are up, but they're trying to make it through the other side. And your patronage helps that. So it's not easy, but it's what we've got to keep doing.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And Mary, if you're raising your hand, I can't see you. I don't have a picture on you. Or Brett, you can jump in too if you need to. If you have a question, Brett.
How is Ludlow feeling? How is it? I get to drive around this beautiful state and get that insight myself, and I just don't. So tell me how the town is doing through all this.
Well, Ludlow's very busy. So on weekends, holidays, we still have a lot of traffic, a lot of visitors. We're 90% or over second homeowners here. And I think we're seeing a lot of them coming up. Some have come up and stayed. A lot of people are doing their meetings from their condos or their houses or whatever. We are getting a fair amount of rentals, like you're saying, the Airbnbs and all those. I know people who have rented their homes out. And, you can see them when it was warmer out. You could see lots of people standing outside some of the restaurants or the takeouts or there's a bar in town. And you could have 50 people outside of a restaurant having drinks, waiting to, just trying to enjoy the outside, trying to social distance.
And I'm sure all those people have committed to the 14-day quarantine according to law, right?
Well, I would say not. So I will tell you that it's been very difficult for us realtors, and we have people that don't quite understand why they can't come up and they can't see homes. We do a lot with virtual tours. I've sold many houses sight unseen or just with a virtual tour. But I've had people I know that have just, they've decided not to buy, or they've gone to a different realtor because I make them be COVID compliant and sign the forms. And that's just, I would say the majority of the people in the area do that. And they have to have their forms all filled out, and the state does check on them. We haven't been checked in our office, but I know they've done some Burlington area. So it's a new world for us in the real estate business. We are selling, so we're probably up 40% over last year. And last year was 2019 was a great year for us as well. So people are thinking that Vermont might be the place to be. And there's some were converting what they had for second homes. They're thinking they're going to make them their primary. I have owners that are asking, what are the schools like in the area?
Good.
So that's not unusual. So I think there may be a turnaround for some of our schools. Who knows?
Well,
but, a lot of things are different.
Yeah, I've been an advocate for increasing the population, specifically the workforce aged population. We need more workers in this state. And I know this influx of people, if they're here to stay, I think that's good news. Even if they are not entering our workforce because they already have a job remotely, I think that bodes well for us. More people in town, more activity, more economic growth, all of that, more in the schools, all of that will help our economy as we recover. So I would be an advocate we need more people in Vermont. In case you're wondering, we have an aging population, we have an aging demographic, and our workforce participation is declining. So while our population stays the same, as people age, they age out of the workforce, and our workforce population shrinking. We need to increase that workforce population because businesses can't hire anybody. That was pre-COVID. It's going to be even worse post-COVID.
Yeah. Well, anyone else? I think that's good. Well, Betsy, thank you very much. Everyone, round of applause. Appreciate you coming in and sharing your insight. And we may take you up on that, so be careful.
No, well, I really appreciate you having me, and I love hearing what's on your mind. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll continue on with our meeting. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks.